parent's part.
And let's continue with that then too. Suppose the parents absolutely made sure that the child wasn't on MySpace, didn't give them a password unless they were sitting there, so they did all that they possibly reasonably could, but nevertheless the child found a way to text and harass or put a Facebook account up and harass another child who commits suicide. Now, the parents can say, we did all that we could. Are they legal? Are they liable?
And that gets back to David's definition of what is negligence. Did they do what was reasonably expected for them to do? So it's all based on facts.
Yeah. It's dependent on the facts of each situation, as Jackie said, and then did those parents take steps that other reasonable parents would have taken. And if they did all those things, sometimes something happens that they're not responsible for.
And then what happens, are the parents culpable for that child depending on what the outcome is? So my child being a recipient of these terrible messages, she becomes depressed, she has to take medicine. That's one thing. Suppose the child commits suicide. Is there really some other greater, like the arm of the law that can go after the parent because of the outcome, what the actual, now you have a criminal situation there, or do you not?
You could, potentially, but who is the criminal case against? If the parents didn't do anything active and encouraging, and now remember there were cases I think back on where the parent actually was involved in some of the cyber stalking, harassing, bullying, whichever level it would rise to, that parent was responsible for their own actions. In this case, what you're describing to me, a student doing it, the parent tried to take steps to stop it. I would suggest that the student or the child would be responsible, and they could be charged as a juvenile delinquent perhaps if they violated a statute, just like if they committed a crime, you know, robbing a store. It's the same idea.
I think the case that you're talking about is the student in a different state who committed suicide because she was being harassed over the internet. It was actually a was it a website, or she created an identity?
The mother did.
The mother created an identity that basically she had online messages with the individual, the person who committed suicide. And if I remember correctly, in that case, the mother could only be charged with misdemeanor.
Yeah, I don't remember all the facts, but that does...
Because the laws, as you said before, haven't caught up with the internet and technology and electronics. They're trying to change that.
But in terms of intent, she crafted a person who didn't exist. She had other people, even coerced other people to text messages. So she was really building a case. I'm sure she wasn't intentionally trying to have that girl commit suicide, but the outcome was the outcome.
Right. And it doesn't matter. The law sometimes doesn't, the result of what you intend sometimes matters, but oftentimes it doesn't. If you do something that's reckless or negligent and it results in something totally not what you expected to happen, you're still responsible.
So when we're initially talking about children and they're having anti-harassment or some sort of guidelines in the schools and why the parents are responsible, let's go to the older group now, the ones who are in college and they're responsible or supposedly responsible for themselves, although admittedly many young people are very immature these days, and that with the power of publishing, God knows terrible things happen. How about the I guess it's Tyler Clementi, the Rutgers boy, he commits suicide as a result of some overexposure on the internet. Those two boys, how responsible are they to be? Apparently there's some debate about whether there's a felony involved. What's the story about that?
There was an issue of privacy.
That was the first
invasion of privacy. Then there was some talk about it being a hate crime because of the individual's sexual preference.
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly where they've gotten with that and if they can actually reach as far as saying it's a harassment.
But talk about it hypothetically. If you have someone who has a sexual preference that is homosexual in this case, and it's his own private business, and you take private, surreptitiously filmed videos of him, and then expose those to the internet, and he kills himself, that's, to me, an easy connection to make between your violating the law. You know, there's felony murder charges, perhaps, if it rises to a felony, or misdemeanor murder charges. And that's a very possible case for an attorney general to make, or a district attorney.
So at the first level, the invasion of privacy, when someone's surreptitiously, when someone's taking pictures of you in your dressing room, in your bathroom, that's an invasion of privacy. What happens then? That's illegal. What's the punishment for that crime?
Well, there's two things there. You can sue for a crime. I mean, well, the Attorney General or the state can bring a crime, or you could sue civilly. And I don't know what happened with it, but I think there was an ESPN reporter who was being harassed, stalked, and videotaped by somebody. And both criminal charges could have been brought against that person, and she could sue civilly for her harassment and invasion of her privacy.
The difference in that case, though, is it happened continuously. It didn't happen just once versus the Tyler Clementi case where it was just one incident.
It was one incident, but it was a pretty
the result
invasive.
Was,
yeah.
And so now, yet the other element that you were talking about, potentially it being a bias crime, that's a subjective thing, a harder thing to prove. Is that why it's an issue? Because it's hard to prove that it was just that young man who uploaded it to the internet, did he or didn't he do it because he was against homosexuals?
Well,
is that the issue?
Look, anybody can be charged with a crime. The question is, do they have enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime? In that particular situation, if I was the Attorney General, I would look at that person's background. Was there harassment during his lifetime towards other homosexuals? Was he constantly, making fun of this person? One incident, I don't know if it would rise to the level of a hate crime.
You would want to investigate in that case the relationship between the two roommates and what had preceded this incident. This may be the culminating event of many underlying problems and things that have come up, or it may have been, as Jackie said, just a one-time thing. Hey, this is funny, let's just do it. Didn't matter if he was heterosexual, homosexual, we're just going to do this because this is a dumb thing that we can sit and do. And sometimes, and we've often said this with the internet before, people should think, cell phones, when they text and send things, before they push the send button. Remember, we always say that, and I read somewhere a pretty good line about drop the mouse and step away from the computer before somebody gets hurt. Take some time, in other words, to think before you send something.
People have to understand that you have absolutely no expectation of privacy when you're putting your information on the internet, when there's a website or social media. Anytime you email, anytime you send a text message, where's your expectation of privacy? Because you can send it to one person and somebody then by virtue of email can send it to 22 other people.
You bring up a good point. Does it really become a legal issue when, say, I decide to throw to the wind, caution to the wind, when I want to send out a message that discloses or completely abandons my sense of privacy? Am I supposed to then assume that everyone else who's on the internet also has no right to privacy because I've surrendered my own? Can you legislate that?
No, but what you just said was if I send it out, I think what you then have done is given up your expectation of privacy, and you should just assume it's going around the world 4 or 5 times.
Right.
And that's that.
And because I've done it, then should I not only assume that everyone else who's on the internet has also equally surrendered their right to privacy because they are encouraged, and many do list every single precious thought that they had or blur out whatever they say, and
emails.
that absolutely surrenders their privacy.
Sure it does, if someone puts it out there.
If it's on a blog, if it's in an email, if it's in a website, that like David said, once you push that send button, your expectation of privacy is gone.
Right. The difference being if you send it versus if someone sends it about you. That's where the line can get crossed.
In thinking about the issue with Tyler Clementi and the sexual bias situation, there are a lot of groups now who are not only talking about legislating or thinking about the criminal side of this, but also thinking about their own personal agendas, about almost reaching cult status, about this is our sexual preference and we need to put this forth. We now have an opportunity because of the internet to suddenly champion my cult, my sexual preference, or what is actually happening? Do you have more people who are interested in legislating their own personal agendas in the name of protection against what might be said against them?
Oh, I think you're going to see a lot of law